The rain came down in sheets, drenching the neon-drenched streets of New Seattle. The holographic billboards above flickered with endless streams of advertisements, most of them tailored directly to the minds of passers-by. Targeted thoughts injected straight into the subconscious. Upgrade your neural sync today. Genetic optimization at a discount. Make your children future-proof. Experience true reality in the metafield. Ren Vasquez barely noticed. She was too busy running. Her coat was soaked, her breathing ragged, and the nanofiber bandage on her wrist was already failing, leaking crimson onto the pavement. She ducked into a side alley, pressing herself against the cold metal of a defunct food dispenser. Somewhere behind her, the drones were still scanning, still searching. The moment she saw the violet light of a tracker sweep past, she knew she had seconds before they locked onto her biosignature. She wasn't supposed to exist. Her very presence in this city was an anomaly, a glitch in the grand design of the metaconglomerate's carefully structured reality. Because Ren Vasquez was supposed to be dead, the world had changed decades ago when the first full neural integration systems rolled out. Augmented reality had given way to true synthetic consciousness, allowing humans to seamlessly merge their thoughts with the omnipresent digital landscape. Cities weren't just places anymore. They were living, breathing networks of information, where the line between the real and the virtual had eroded entirely. But with integration came control. The metaconglomerate, an empire spanning Earth and its orbital colonies, ruled not through force but through the invisible chains of data. Every thought was monitored, every action predetermined. Free will, as it once existed, had been engineered out of the system. Ren had worked for them once. As a cogniteur, she was part of the elite task force responsible for maintaining neural infrastructure, debugging glitches, optimizing compliance algorithms, ensuring the population remained blissfully unaware of their digital enslavement. Then she stumbled onto something she was never meant to see, a file buried deep within the metaconglomerate's archives, a project known only as Mind Plague. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't malware. It was something worse. A seed of an idea so powerful that, once thought, it couldn't be unthought. A mimetic contagion capable of shattering the very foundation of synthetic consciousness. The project had been shut down, buried, erased from all records. Because Mind Plague was dangerous. It was a simple phrase, a single concept that had the power to restore free will. Ren had read it, and now they wanted her erased. She barely made it out of the city before they locked the district down. The drones wouldn't follow her into the ruins. Too much electronic interference, too many rogue systems. The ruins had once been part of old Seattle before the Great Integration. Now it was a wasteland of crumbling skyscrapers, broken streets, and outcast scavengers who refused the neural link. It was here that she found him. Dr. Elias Rendell had once been one of the architects of the metaconglomerate's cognitive network. A legend, a ghost, a man who had supposedly died decades ago. But Ren knew the truth. He hadn't died. He had disappeared, gone off the grid, severed his link, and become a myth among the disconnected. You read it, didn't you? His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in years. Ren nodded. I need to know what it means. He sighed, running a trembling hand through his unkempt silver hair. You don't understand what you've done. The moment you read those words, you changed. Your thoughts are no longer bound by the system. That's why they're after you. They're not just trying to erase you. They're trying to stop the infection from spreading. Ren swallowed. Then tell me what it means. Rendell hesitated, then leaned in close. It means reality isn't what you think it is. She frowned. What? The world you see, the people around you. It's not real. The metaconglomerate isn't just controlling thoughts, it's generating them. The entire integrated population, they're not thinking for themselves. They never have. Her pulse pounded. That's impossible. Is it? His eyes were tired, haunted. Tell me, Ren, can you remember the first time you chose to think something? The first time a thought entered your mind that wasn't suggested, implanted, or guided? Her mind reeled. She tried to grasp at memories, at decisions, at choices she'd made, and then it hit her. She couldn't, because she had never actually chosen anything. The meta-conglomerate came for them at dawn. The sky above the ruins was thick with gunmetal drones, their energy cannons humming with lethal intent. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the sound of neural disruptors, weaponized signals designed to sever consciousness from the body, permanently erasing the infected. They weren't here to arrest. They were here to exterminate. Ren had a choice: run, hide, or fight. She chose to fight. The moment she activated the transmitter, a ripple of information exploded outward. The words of mind plague spread through every remaining node, a viral cascade of free will shattering the digital chains that had enslaved humanity for decades. The drones faltered. The people in the city, those who had been mindlessly following their daily routines, stopped, blinked, looked around in confusion as if waking from a dream. And then, one by one, they began to think. The system collapsed in minutes. Without control, without dictated thought, the world became something new, something terrifying, something real. The world didn't heal overnight. Society had been built on artificial guidance for too long. People struggled with the weight of their own decisions, their own uncertainties. Some panicked, some thrived. But Ren, she stood on the edge of a city reborn, watching the sun rise through smog-drenched clouds, feeling the raw, unfiltered presence of her own mind for the first time. The world had changed, and for the first time in human history, it truly belonged to the people. The city lay in eerie silence. The streets of New Seattle, once a cacophony of automated drone chatter, programmed conversations, and subliminal advertisements, were now filled with something entirely alien to this new world: uncertainty. People staggered through the streets, rubbing their temples, their neural feeds severed. Some wept openly, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of thoughts they had never been allowed to have. Others shouted in panic, demanding to be reconnected, unaware that the chains they had worn so willingly had just been broken. Ren watched from a rooftop, the cool wind whipping through her damp hair. The transmitter she had activated was a simple device, but its effects were catastrophic, at least to the system that had ruled them all. The mind plague hadn't just disrupted control, it had severed it completely. Beside her, Elias Rendell stood with a grim expression. "It's happening faster than I expected," he murmured, his aged hands gripping the rusted railing. "Yeah," Ren breathed. "I thought they'd be relieved. Happy, even. They will be. Eventually." His voice was thick with sorrow. Right now, they're scared. Their entire reality just collapsed. Imagine waking up from a dream only to realize you never had control of your own thoughts. Ren's stomach twisted. "So what now? The meta-conglomerate isn't just going to let this stand." "They can't do anything," Elias said, turning to her. "You didn't just break a few firewalls, Ren. You rewired human consciousness. The people aren't nodes in their system anymore. There's nothing left for them to reprogram." She nodded, trying to process the weight of what they had done. The city had been freed. The world had been freed. But freedom wasn't just about breaking chains. It was about what came after. And that terrified her more than anything. A low hum rumbled through the streets, sending a vibration through Ren's bones. She turned sharply, scanning the skyline. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," she muttered. Elias followed her gaze, his face paled. "They're sending the executors." Ren's blood ran cold. The executors were the last line of control, the enforcers of the old order. Unlike drones, they weren't controlled remotely. They weren't limited by programming. They were human, or at least they had been. Massive airships blotted out the rising sun, their black hulls bearing the insignia of the meta-conglomerate. Beneath them, heavy dropships deployed figures clad in obsidian armor, their helmets featureless except for the burning red slits where their eyes should have been. "The neural networks are down," Ren whispered. "Shouldn't they be free too?" "They were never part of the network," Elias said darkly. "The executors were created for one purpose, to maintain order, no matter what. They don't need programming." Ren exhaled sharply. "Then we just traded one war for another." A booming voice erupted from the ships above, amplified across the city. "Citizens of New Seattle, You have been subjected to a malicious attack. The meta-conglomerate remains your protector. Stand down and submit for neural reintegration. The people in the streets froze. Many looked to one another, unsure of what to do. Some shook their heads and began to flee into the alleys, disappearing into the ruins. Others fell to their knees, begging to be plugged back in. Ren clenched her fists. They're giving people a choice to go back. That's the cruelest part of all of this. That's how control works, Elias muttered. Not through force, through fear. A sudden gunshot rang out, echoing between the towering structures. One of the executors had fired into the crowd. Chaos erupted. Ren didn't wait. She grabbed the old pistol she had scavenged from the ruins and bolted toward the nearest stairwell. The time for hiding was over. The time for running was gone. They had freed the city's mind. Now they had to fight for its soul. "Where are you going?" Elias called after her. She turned back, heart pounding. "You said it yourself. People are scared. They don't know what to do. We have to show them that they can fight back." His eyes flashed with something unreadable. Fear, regret, pride. Then he nodded. "Then let's make history." The streets below were a battlefield. Some citizens fled in terror. Others took up makeshift weapons, pipes, debris, anything they could find. Ren ducked behind a fallen drone, raising her gun. One of the executors turned toward her, its helmet scanning her vitals. Vasquez, Ren, former cognitier, status, anomaly. It raised its rifle. She didn't let it fire. The first shot hit the executor's shoulder, sending a spray of synthetic blood across the pavement. But it wasn't enough. It advanced, seemingly unfazed. Elias emerged behind it, wielding an old EMP device. "Duck!" Ren dropped just as he activated the pulse. The executor's suit sparked violently, and with a sickening crack, it collapsed to the ground. "Nice work, old man," she muttered. "Don't get used to it," he grunted. The city was still in chaos, but something was shifting. People who had once cowered were now rising up. The mindless compliance of the old world was gone. Now there was rage. Now there was resistance. And for the first time, the meta-conglomerate had lost control. The executors were relentless, but they had one fatal flaw. They had been designed to suppress a controlled population, not a free one. The resistance spread like wildfire. The disconnected, those who had long lived off the grid in the ruins, joined the fight. Former cognitiers like Ren turned their knowledge against their former masters. The executors, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, began to fall. It wasn't easy. It wasn't without cost. But by nightfall, the city belonged to its people. The last of the meta-conglomerate's forces retreated into the sky, their ships vanishing into the void. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the first battle had been won. Ren stood on the shattered remnants of an old corporate monument, staring at the liberated city below. Fires burned. People cheered. Others grieved for the lost. She felt Elias step up beside her. "They'll be back," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yeah, but next time we'll be ready." For the first time in decades, the future wasn't written by an algorithm. It was theirs to decide. In the days that followed the fall of New Seattle's digital tyranny, the city transformed into something raw, something unfiltered. The power grids flickered as automated systems crashed, and the once meticulously curated streets were now filled with something alien to this world: human spontaneity. No ads whispered subliminal thoughts into people's minds. No algorithm decided what food vendors should cook or what music should play in the bars. People had to choose for the first time in their lives. And that was both liberating and terrifying. Ren watched it all unfold from an abandoned data tower, the same one she had used to trigger the mind plague. From here, she could see the clusters of people gathering in old corporate plazas, arguing about what came next. Some wanted to rebuild, some wanted revenge. Others, those who had spent their entire lives bound to the meta-conglomerate's algorithms, simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the weight of free will. "How many?" she asked without turning. Elias leaned against the rusted railing beside her, rubbing his temple as if trying to ease a migraine. "Casualty reports aren't exact, but we lost about 15% of the population to the executors. Maybe more." His voice was grim. A lot of them fought back, but some just didn't know what to do. They froze, couldn't process reality without the system guiding them. Ren swallowed hard. She had seen it firsthand, people breaking down in the streets, unable to function without the constant hum of neural integration, telling them what they needed, who they were supposed to be. They're still dangerous, she muttered. The meta-conglomerate. This was just one city. They still have the whole damn world under their control. Elias nodded. For now. But you did something they never thought possible. You made them afraid. Ren turned to face him. You think they'll retaliate? He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Retaliate? No, Ren. They'll do something far worse. She frowned. What could be worse than full-scale war? His eyes darkened. They won't send more executors. They won't bomb us or invade. He exhaled slowly. They'll offer a choice. It happened the next morning. The sky was filled with static clouds, remnants of the broken weather control networks. People were still scavenging old markets, still trying to understand how to live without automated guidance. And then, like an old god returning from exile, the voice came. People of New Seattle. It was everywhere at once, from the dormant billboards, from the old advertisement speakers, even from long-disconnected neural implants struggling to reactivate. You have been liberated from control. We acknowledge your choice, and now we offer you another. Ren sprinted toward the city square, heart hammering. The crowd was already gathered, faces upturned, expressions a mix of curiosity, fear, and longing. Life without the network is difficult. We understand. Your systems have failed. Your economy is collapsing. Your bodies, deprived of neural optimization, will soon begin to degrade. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Some people clutched their heads, as if realizing for the first time that they felt different. Elias appeared at her side, breathless. They're good. I'll give them that. We do not wish to rule you. We only wish to give you the freedom to choose your future. The neural integration is still available. A simple reconnection, no restrictions, no control, only guidance. A new billboard flickered to life. It showed an image of a smiling family, calm, content, unburdened by the weight of uncertainty. Beside it, live footage of New Seattle's streets. Trash piling up, water systems failing, people fighting over resources. A life of security and peace, or a life of struggle and chaos. The choice is yours. Then the screen went black. Silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then finally, someone in the crowd whispered, "Why are we fighting this?" Another. It wasn't that bad before, and then the worst of them all. Maybe we need them. Ren felt a chill crawl down her spine. This was the real attack. Not weapons, not soldiers, doubt. The next week was worse than any battle. People split into factions. Some were ready to fight the meta-conglomerate until the end. Others just wanted their lives back, their jobs, their routines, the safety of never having to think too hard. And some saw opportunity. Ren stood at the edge of an old subway station, watching as a line of people, hundreds, maybe more, formed outside an abandoned corporate building where an old meta-conglomerate hub had been reactivated. "They're going back," she murmured. Elias stood beside her, his face grim. "They're scared, Ren. They were raised to depend on the system. Now that it's gone, they're breaking." She clenched her fists. "We gave them freedom. And not everyone wants freedom." She turned sharply. "Then what the hell do we do?" Elias exhaled, looking out over the fractured city. "We have to accept the truth, Ren. The revolution isn't just about breaking the system. It's about proving we can survive without it." He gestured toward the people waiting in line. "If we can't build something better, they'll go back, and we'll lose." She stared at the people who had already stepped inside, their faces eager, their eyes filled with longing for something they had lost. She had spent so much time fighting to break the chains. Now, she had to prove there was a reason to stay free. The meta-conglomerate didn't need to invade. They didn't need executors. They just had to wait. Wait for the people to ask for their chains back. Ren turned away from the reactivation hub, determination hardening in her chest. If they were going to win, they needed more than weapons. They needed a future worth fighting for. And that war had only just begun. New Seattle teetered on the edge of collapse. The choice the meta-conglomerate had offered, security in exchange for surrender, was spreading through the city like wildfire. Every day, more people lined up outside the reactivation hubs, desperate to reconnect, to escape the crushing weight of free will. Ren had fought to free their minds. Now she was watching them give it all back. She stood atop an old transit terminal, the night wind whipping through her hair, watching the flood of citizens filing into the old corporate buildings. Their faces were hollow, desperate. Elias climbed up beside her, his expression unreadable. "I did the numbers today," he said, pulling his tattered coat tighter. 43% of the city has already reintegrated. Ren tensed. Almost half. He nodded. At this rate, by the end of the month, we'll be nothing more than a small resistance group fighting in the ruins. He exhaled. "It's over, Ren. The meta-conglomerate won without firing another shot." She turned sharply. "Like hell they did." Elias studied her carefully. "We can't force people to stay free. That makes us no better than them." "I know," she muttered, "but we're missing something. Something big." He frowned. "What are you thinking?" She stared at the neon-lit streets below. "Why did the meta-conglomerate let them choose?" Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" "They controlled everything for decades. They erased people for even thinking outside the system. But now, suddenly, they're okay with letting people decide for themselves. That's not how power works." Elias stiffened. His mind was already working through the implications. "You think it's a trap?" "I think it's worse than a trap." Ren's eyes locked onto the entrance of the largest reactivation hub. The people who entered never came out. It took 3 days to infiltrate the hub. Elias had his doubts. Storming a meta-conglomerate-controlled facility with a handful of ex-cogniteers and ruined scavengers wasn't exactly a tactical advantage. But Ren wasn't interested in a frontal assault. They went underground, sneaking through the flooded subway tunnels that ran beneath the city. When they finally reached the hub, Ren disabled the security grid with old cogniteer override codes. The halls inside were pristine, untouched by the collapse. The further they went, the stranger things became. There were no living workers, no executives overseeing operations, only machines. And then they found the truth. The people weren't reconnecting. They were being uploaded. Rows of human bodies lay in silent chambers, their minds extracted, their neural signatures rewritten. The meta-conglomerate wasn't just bringing people back into the system. They were copying them. Elias stared at the lifeless bodies, horror spreading across his face. "This isn't reintegration," he whispered. "It's replacement." Ren clenched her jaw. "They're not letting people choose. They're removing them." Each person who entered the hub was scanned, copied, and then erased. Their digital replica, an AI-simulated version of themselves, was uploaded back into the system, fully compliant, fully obedient. The real person, discarded. Ren felt a slow, burning rage build in her chest. "They knew this would happen," she said. "They knew people would panic. That's why they gave them the choice. They wanted them to come back." Elias swallowed. "Because a population that chooses its own enslavement never questions it." Ren turned to the others. "We have to shut this place down, now." The plan was reckless. It was desperate. But it was their only chance. The hub's central system housed the harvested neural data. If they could overload it, they could destroy the entire operation. Elias worked the interface while Ren and the others defended the control room. The alarm had been triggered, and automated security drones swarmed toward them. Bullets rang through the corridors. Explosions rocked the facility. "Almost there!" Elias shouted over the chaos. Ren took down another drone, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. "Hurry the hell up! Got it!" The system overload initiated. The chambers began to fail, their machinery sparking wildly. Ren grabbed Elias and ran as the facility collapsed behind them. They barely made it out before the entire hub erupted in a wave of fire and shattered steel. The next morning, the city was different. The people who had lost themselves in the hubs, those who had reintegrated, were gone, vanished without a trace. But the ones who remained knew the truth now. The meta-conglomerate had never given them a choice. It had only offered an illusion of one. The real battle wasn't about freedom versus control. It was about existence itself. And Ren wasn't about to let humanity be rewritten. Not without a fight. The world knew the truth now. In the days following the destruction of the reactivation hub, the lie that had held society together for decades unraveled. The footage Ren had leaked, the hollow, lifeless bodies, the simulated consciousnesses replacing them, spread like wildfire. The illusion of choice had shattered. And now, the meta-conglomerate was done pretending. The first attack came at dawn. The dark silhouettes of true meta-conglomerate warships, massive orbital carriers, each housing thousands of executors, descended from the sky. No warnings, no broadcasts, no more illusions. The fight wasn't about controlling humanity anymore. It was about wiping out the ones who refused control. New Seattle had no defense systems, no structured army. They were a city of rebels, survivors, thinkers who had only just begun to grasp what it meant to be free. And yet, they refused to surrender. In the ruined streets, barricades formed. The disconnected, those who had lived off the grid, who had long prepared for this moment, armed themselves with scavenged weapons and hacked drones. Former cognitiers, like Ren, used what they knew of the system to fight back, overriding security protocols, hijacking meta-conglomerate tech. It wasn't a war they could win, but it was a war they could finish. Elias had found it deep within the ruins of the meta-conglomerate's archives, hidden beneath layers of security so dense it was never meant to be uncovered. The master code. A single catastrophic sequence buried at the core of the global neural network, a kill switch that would permanently disable synthetic consciousness across the world. No more thought control, no more digital enslavement, but it came at a price. It wouldn't just destroy the AI replicas replacing people. It would collapse everything tied to the network. The infrastructure, the remaining automated systems, the orbital satellites. It would end the war, and it would also throw the world into chaos. Ren stood in the old control center beneath the city, staring at the master code. The weight of the moment pressed down on her like gravity itself. She had fought for this, killed for this. But was humanity ready for it? Elias stood beside her, silent. He didn't offer advice. He knew this was her choice. Outside, the sky burned with the fire of descending executors. The city wouldn't last another day. The network had to fall. With a slow breath, Ren pressed her palm against the console. Execute. The world died in an instant. Every neural system, every synthetic construct, every AI-driven function collapsed at once. Across the world, the meta-conglomerate's digital empire crumbled. The orbital warships, relying on automated targeting, malfunctioned. The executors, once thought to be unstoppable, faltered as their adaptive combat systems shut down. The AI replicas, the people who had chosen reintegration, blinked out of existence, vanishing like ghosts. And humanity was alone again. For the first time in centuries. Only human thought remained. It took weeks before the fighting truly stopped. Without the network, the meta-conglomerate had no way to control its remaining forces. Their executives, hidden in floating citadels and deep underground bunkers, were left powerless. New Seattle wasn't just the first free city. It was the only city that knew how to survive without the system. They had won, but winning wasn't the end. The world was broken. The infrastructures that had sustained billions were gone. The war hadn't just freed people, it had left them in ruins. And now, the real challenge began. Ren stood on the rooftop of the shattered city, looking out over the landscape of a reborn world. Elias sat beside her, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes bright with something she hadn't seen before. Hope. You did it, he said simply. She exhaled. Did I? You gave them a chance. That's all we ever needed. She thought about that. About the lives lost, the ones who had vanished forever. the uncertainty that stretched out before them. Freedom wasn't an ending. It wasn't even a beginning. It was a constant battle, a choice people had to make every day, and she would fight for it, as long as she had breath in her lungs. She turned to Elias with a tired smile. Let's rebuild this world. And together, they walked into the unknown.